he's the head of business consultancy at Sapphire, our very gracious and generous sponsors, but he's also part of a leading UK security services company. They're all about information governance, best practice, standards, and as you're going to find out, and you can see on screen, ISO 27000 series. That's the stuff that's, for many of us, is our bread and butter. So Vernon's also sat on ISACA's COBIT-5 task force and has not quite all of the ISACA certifications. I don't think you've collected the full set of pens yet.
I haven't got CISM, but I am a qualified auditor.
Yeah. But nonetheless, I'm really grateful for him coming along and hand over. Thank you, Vernon.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you've had a good lunch. ISO 27002, 2022. I've been involved in the ISO committees for 30 odd years, can you believe? Which is quite frightening, really. So I know it from the old BS 7799 days. Some of you are too young to even remember that designation, and involved in all the updates to it. And this is probably the most significant and the most important. So can I just ask very quickly, how many people are ISO certified? Oh, so there's a lot of non-believers who need to be convinced. So you'll be excited by the end of this presentation, and you will heed your ways and get better. So this is who I am. Been a recognised trainer in information security management since 1979. Sit on both the UK and international user groups. So from an ISO side, there are 59 countries who contribute to the standards. So it's not just UK, it's across the world. And I was a presenter at the first International 27001 day in January. So head of business consulting at Sapphire, worked very extensive with ISACA for many years. You're probably wondering where the identity protection of Ratatouille comes. For those who don't know, some people can't pronounce Vernon, but can pronounce vermin. So that's where the rat comes in. And the wooden spoon is, I am very blunt about the state of information security. So if people are looking for a professional, qualified discussion rather than talking about reality, then leave the building now, because this is a very serious subject and there's a lot of work we need to do. We heard from Maggie this morning to do with threat intelligence, and you won't be surprised to know that it's now included within the ISO 27002 revised set. So I won't be talking too much about that because I couldn't have put it more eloquently than what Maggie did this morning. So this is the agenda, and this is what I want to cover. What is ISO 27002? It used to be called the Code of Practice. You get certified to ISO 27001, and the Annex A, the annex at the back, is these controls. They're now called a set of controls. I'll talk about the changes to the guiding principles, that you've gone from 14 guiding principles to what is now called 4 themes. What the new and revised controls are, because there's been many changes and it's been updated because the current version is 27002, 27001, 2013. So 9 years have elapsed, and I think technology has moved on quite significantly. Importantly, what the new perspectives and attributes are that have been added to each control, which is really, really interesting and appeal to many stakeholders, especially people at a business level and the audit committees and non-execs. Why you should adopt the changes? Because with a fast-moving, dynamic threat environment, we need to actually put the baseline controls in place. And I'll repeat that term. These are baseline controls. They're not the maximum, they're the minimum. So when I go and help organizations to get certified, and they say, you know, we're aiming to get 27001 certified, I think they must be pretty poor if they haven't even put the baselines in. I never say that, but you sometimes think it. Not that I would say it in a public audience. And what the benefits are of going for the standards. So just to give a summary of what it is, and this is very significant, probably the most significant change they've actually made, the new and enhanced title, and it's quite a mouthful. but it covers both information cybersecurity and privacy protection. So all three of these areas are now contained under one standard. It's the first time it's ever happened, because everywhere I go now, people aren't called information security officers, they've got cybersecurity, because it sounds more sexy. And it's like, you know, what is it? Cybersecurity is just one element of information security. Privacy is going to be one of the biggest growing areas out there. So what the standard has done, and what all the countries together have said, is we'll have one standard that embraces all three: information security, cybersecurity, and privacy. That's got to be much easier for everybody, especially people at the board level. It was published in February 2022. If you're already certified, you've got a 2-year transition to the new controls. That 2-year transition starts when ISO 27001 gets revised to be in line with this set of controls. So just in terms of the certification process, whilst the set of controls was issued in February 2022, they are currently going through and revising 27001, the certification process, because that includes certain clauses to do with leadership, planning, operations, ongoing compliance, etc. So they had discussions of those in May. I can announce today that ISO 27001 2022 will be issued in early October of this year. So they're going to be changing the Annex A to the new set of controls, and they're also changing some of the clauses, mainly clause 612, which is to do with the risk treatment, because there we're looking at mitigating the new controls, mitigating the risk with the new controls, and also including threat intelligence within the risk assessment process. So that will be a new theme that you'll have to absorb. So it looks like when that's announced in October, they will then need to train the external auditors. So I would say if you're not certified and you want to get certified to the new set of controls, probably the earliest would be in March or April next year. If you're already certified, it'll probably be up till October 2024. If you want to go against the new set of controls, you can speak to your external certifying bodies and agree between yourselves when you want to migrate to these new set of controls. What is important, though, is it is a game changer for the fact that the biggest thing they're doing is trying to make it appeal to all organizations of any size, public or private, because it's going to be based on the themes of appropriateness and proportionality. So it'll be proportionate, it'll be appropriate to the control and the control environment you've got, and proportionate to the size of organization. So it's not being seen as a big Damocles that smaller organizations shouldn't want to attain. It's something that everybody needs to have trust in each other. So whoever in your trading circle, they want that level of trust. So you're probably all aware of third-party questionnaires that come out because of assurance and due diligence, and that marketplace has gone absolutely crazy. When people like Deutsche Bank are sending questionnaires in 6 sections and 360 questions to a small organization, it's complete OTT. It's absolutely ridiculous. And the major banks and some of the others organizations, it's just an industry in its own right. And it's crazy and it's stupid. And we need to get a situation where you can look at a particular set of controls that everybody can achieve to give that level of trust. I'm not against sending additional questionnaires, but suddenly we're in a world where people are spending 3 or 4 days filling in questionnaires just because everybody wants to cover their own back. That's just the world that we live in, but it's there. So if we look now at the current 14 guiding principles, all those are still going to be retained, but they're actually going to be presented in 4 what they call themes. And this is to make it easy to appeal to small SME organisations rather than trying to give them a fog factor. But going from right to left, under organisation controls will come items on the left-hand side 1 to 4 and 11 to 14. All those are now going to be organisational controls. Obviously, number 2, people controls, is going to be number 4, HR, and number 3, physical controls, is going to be physical and environmental, which leaves the technological controls to be 6 to 10. So all they're trying to do is make it easier for people to understand what the approach is. The themes are going to be there, and you'll see there that most of the controls are going to sit within organisational and technological controls, because there is some changes, but not many, to people and physical controls. If you want to see the breakdown, those 14 guiding principles covered 114 controls. It now covers 93. And what you can see there is that 58 of them were updated, 24 were merged, and there were 11 new controls added, with 35 remaining the same. So if anybody's got a copy of ISO 27002, the current version, the 2022 version is much bigger. There's a hell of a lot more guidance in there. And you'll see in terms of the update and mergers what the changes have been, and I'll talk about those in a minute. But you can see under the 4 themes, 37 sit under organisational controls, 34 in technological, 14 in physical, and 8 in people controls, where you can see there's no new controls under people controls, but the majority sit in technological controls, and I'll go through each of them in terms of what they are and what you're expected to achieve. So in terms of the updating, what they're doing is changing some of the terminology. They used to talk about teleworking. I have no idea what teleworking is, and these days nobody does. I've heard of Teletubbies, but teleworking is... So it's now gone to remote working, agile working, some people call it, or now we're going to be calling it hybrid working. User registration, everything's into identity management now, and there's been some changes just to make it simpler for any size of organisation to understand what these terms are, and in a lot of cases they're just changing the names to what the current terms are now known as. In terms of merging, as you can see, they went from 114 to 93. So you can see, just for example, the last bullet point there was a lot to do with change management, and they've just grouped them all together to make it easier. You can see it, the one above, user access provisioning, review of access rights, removal, is just to do with access rights. So it's cleaner, simpler, and far easier for many types of organisations to adopt, with a clear understanding of what's required of them. So these are the new controls. Some of them aren't necessarily new, but they are revisions, and there's a difference in terms of the articulation. Very soon, Ratatouille will disappear, and you get a picture of me there, as that's my synth. I'm going to be called Vernon, because my family youngsters can't pronounce Vernon, so they call me Vernon, so it sounds like some kind of Norwegian person, but that's been christened as being Vernon. What you can see, interestingly enough, is just taking threat intelligence, that's seen as an organisational control, that's not seen as a technological control. Because a bit like Maggie said this morning, what the standard asks for is, where do you get your threat intelligence feeds from? And can you break it down between strategic, operational, and tactical approach that you adopt on threat intelligence? So everything that Maggie mentioned this morning is exactly what the standard's going to be asking you to do, to outline what your position is in terms of threat intelligence. It's obviously linked to risk management in terms of looking at new and emerging risks and who's out there and how you're going to mitigate those. But that is new. That is very important. And what you can see from here and also in the standard itself, it's very much down to proactive monitoring. Not just saying we've got the controls, you're actually monitoring and reviewing them. So there's a lot to do with monitoring. You can see there at number 9, your monitoring activities. And in there, they talk about whether or not people want to deploy artificial intelligence as part of that information gathering and monitoring of your activities. The second one is information security for cloud services. No surprise, everybody's moving for good reasons to the cloud, AWS, Azure, whoever. And there is also a standard there that you can actually look at in terms of what the requirements are as you as an acquirer or what you do as a supplier. And I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But there is guidance out there in terms of the different standards that's contained within the ISO family. So for those who don't know, the ISO standards for security go from ISO 27000 up to ISO 27059. So if you ever see any sad individual on Mastermind asking questions on the ISO ranges, ISO 27 to 27059, it'll be me. And I am that boring person who will know everything about each of those standards. But I have got a life outside the ISO world, I can assure you. Also, ICT readiness for business continuity. So as you know, there is ISO 22031 to do with business continuity, but for the ICT readiness, it's saying now with hybrid working, there's a greater need for connectivity. If people are going to be working from home, they need to be able to still provide a level of service. So the big focus is on ICT readiness for business continuity. Interestingly, number 4 is physical security monitoring. We all talk about physical perimeter, your CCTV, you know, what you demonstrate, what you designate as secure areas. What they're asking there is physical security monitoring. You do social engineering. Do you work out what's there? Do you capture that information? Do you make sure it's still working? The next one, number 5, configuration management, isn't new. It was an omission from the previous version. Interestingly enough, items 6 to 8 are all related to privacy. So they're new privacy controls linked to GDPR that you need to make sure that you can give information about how you protect personally identified information, or what we call personal and sensitive information. Monitoring activities I mentioned before, but it's everything to do with all the scripts, all the information you gather to look at trend analysis to support the work you do up in terms of number 1, in terms of threat intelligence. Web filtering, not a new control. Secure coding principles, not a new control, but added to the technological controls areas. So those are the 11 new controls. Now, interestingly, when you're actually bringing this together, this is what's really important, is those organizational controls are the responsibility of an information security forum. From a business perspective. So you need to know how much money you're going to be spending on there. So they look at areas like policy. Have you got a corporate information security policy? You set objectives. How do you communicate both internally and externally? And importantly there, in terms of organizational security, the designated roles and then the assignment to protect your crown jewels. So they're looking for who's got designated responsibilities for cyber information and privacy. The next one is asset management, and there you've got threat intelligence. Maggie mentioned this morning, you've got to identify the threats, importantly the threat actors, and what tools you use, and have you got the capabilities and competencies to look at the results that the intelligence is telling you. Supplier relationships, includes the information security for cloud services, and you've got there ISO 27017-2021. Anybody seen that? If you haven't seen it and you're working with cloud providers and you need to know what your responsibilities are as an acquirer and a supplier, there are great lists included in that. Obviously, these other controls are going to be updated in line with 27002-2022. So there's a lot of work now looking at the operational guidance to support people when they're looking at information security for the use of cloud services. Incident management, incident response, not surprising as in the talk that Mag gave this morning, they're interrelated in terms of the threats and the response. And obviously in terms of GDPR, you need to have a personal breach notification approach where you've got 72 hours to report what you're going to do within there. So again, it's not surprising that's under organizational controls. Business continuity, especially ICT continuity and compliance to legal, regulatory and contractual obligations. So where people in the forum sit, these are business decisions in terms of what we're doing in each of those areas. And it is very significant because a significant number of controls sit there, and that resides strictly with the Information Security Forum. The people controls on HR, those are the standard ones. All of them there, apart from the last three, are already included there. They're already in the current version. Obviously, they've added confidentiality, non-disclosure agreements under HR, remote or hybrid working, and also information security event reporting. The reason they've included incident information security event reporting there is to make sure that staff, if they're working from home, know the type of incidents they should be reporting to service desk. People need to know that. You know, what is it you want people to report? It's like people talk about misuse and say misuse won't be tolerated, but they don't outline what types of misuse you mean. So it's very glib to say misuse won't be tolerated, but what constitutes misuse? Equally, information security incidents, what is it? And what are the things you want in staff to report? Because with a more disparate workforce, and you want to find out who's tracking you from a threat intelligence point of view, your company could be targeted. Until staff, general staff, any member of staff knows what they're expected to report and guidance, then they're not going to report it. So that sits under HR security. The next one is physical security controls, which resides obviously with facilities management. And you can see there a whole list. The only one underlined is number 4, is physical security monitoring. And you need to make sure that people monitor clear desk, clear screen, working in secure areas. Can people get in there? Or, you know, I've gone to many places and, you know, people find, you know, boxes in secure areas or cleaning equipment, you know, which is quite fluid, you know, fluids, and that's health and safety. So there's lots of issues you need to be aware of. But do you do social engineering? Do you do reviews? Does this take place with information security officer and with internal audit or with facilities? Do you do that on a regular 6 weekly or quarterly basis? So the emphasis now on physical security monitoring, because, you know, you look at the picture there and there's lots of drones going around. Drones are absolutely perfect now to find out what's going on. You'd be amazed during COVID how many drones were sent up over Canary Wharf to find out who was there, what was in the buildings. I've worked at many places where I've been given a presentation somewhere and there's been a drone outside the window. And I said, oh, we'll get them all the time. So they're out there not being used for the reasons they are to be used. And it's very easy. They can scout a site, they can see what's going on very easily. So if they can do it easily and we are not doing it ourselves, who's the fool? The next one is technological controls, and this sits as a responsibility within IT and information security or cyber security. You can see there at number 1, they don't talk about mobile devices. They talk now about endpoint devices to address things like IoT, the Internet of Things. Why you can get an IoT kettle, I have no idea, but you can. And that's the reason you can. And I was talking to Maggie when she finished talking, and we're talking about Internet of Things. And, you know, a lot of these people who put IoT devices out on the marketplace, especially for home, is they want to be the first in the marketplace. Is it security by design? No. Is there any good security protocols? Very few. How many people using them? Yes. Do the children use them a lot? Yes. Do geeky individuals use it? Yes. Are more and more people working from home? Yes. Is the risk getting higher? Obviously. Are people silly? I'll leave it to you. Controls on privileged access and secure authentication, very important, not only for GDPR, but generally. Who's got the keys to your kingdom? Cryptographic controls in terms of the use of encryption, especially for personal sensitive information, really important. Obviously, operational security now takes on board those new controls that are there. Communication security is where web filtering is, and development security in terms of secure coding. So yes, there are a lot of technological controls in terms of the checks and balances you put in place to mitigate your technological controls. But remember, from a cybersecurity point of view, the minimum requirements from a UK perspective is Cyber Essentials, more importantly, Cyber Essentials Plus. But when that was created, it was a distillation of the controls that already existed in ISO 27002. So those are the 4 areas. This is the most important aspect of the revision and costs a lot of time and effort, and is very important to all your stakeholders. The ability to cut the controls in different ways to suit different audiences. So number 1, you've still got looking at the controls in terms, number 2 is in terms of security principles, confidentiality, integrity, available. That's what the current setup is. You can now look at it under the control type. Is it preventative, detective, or corrective? You can look at it from a cybersecurity concepts, and that's taken on board all the NIST controls, the NIST cybersecurity principles from the US. The 4th one is operational capabilities, looking at 15 factors. Now, those operational capabilities have come from COBIT 2019. So, not surprising at an ISACA event that the operational capabilities that are contained within COBIT are whether you can improve where you currently are and go beyond the baseline controls, and how good you are in some of these areas. How good are you at supplier relationship security? Have you got the competency? Have you got the capabilities? Could you do more? So depending on the sector you're in, depending on the information you've got, you might want to be stronger in some of those 15 areas. The final one, security domains, this comes from ISACA, the European Security Agency, where they say, can you cut the information between very modern governance and ecosystem, protection, defense, or resilience? And everywhere you go these days, everybody says, how resilient are you? That seems to be the buzzword going around. How resilient are you? Especially in the boardroom. Or you can add additional attributes if you want, either to do with GDPR or specific regulatory requirements based on your sector. The time and effort that's gone into grouping the 93 controls based on these different attributes is incredibly powerful. And if you think about how that's going to be viewed by committees, audit committees from a corporate governance point of view, when they can cut the information and filter the information on this basis, is going to be incredibly powerful. Not only have you got them in place, but how good are you? How many of those, how well are you covered to do with confidentiality? How good are you covered to do with resilience? So when you look at this now, the way the controls are set out is, as I said, in more detail. The guidance at bullet point 2 is very important. They used to talk about what was the word they used? control objectives. So they've replaced control objectives with the purpose. What is the purpose of the controls? So the language they're using is going to be easier for people to understand. The information in each control links you to further guidance if you want more information. So it's going to be easier for people to justify why that control is important for them to adopt if it's appropriate. So you can see here, and this is just an example coming out of the standard, looking at the policies, all the attributes, it'll tell you this is the attributes that are aligned based on those different attribute levels. So every single control will have the different attributes. So you'll be able to go and filter based on whichever attributes you find important. Now you can imagine from a management point of view, from a review point of view, from like audit committees, regulatory bodies, they will want to deploy those filters that are there. So you can imagine the discussions they had in terms of what falls under each. So you can see there, Annex A will show you for each control what its attributes are. So you can set it up, put the filters in, and then aggregate the information based on whichever attribute you find useful. There will be an Annex B that will show you where the current control is and where it's moved to. So you can do a comparison of where it's gone to. None have been deleted. They've just been regrouped to make it easier and reduce the number of controls and introduced a few new ones. Why should you adopt it? Some of these were discussed by Maggie this morning. Organisations are undertaking digital transformation using cloud, now adjusting to hybrid working. Cyber criminals are growing, finding better ways to exploit. She went on about the geopolitical situation we find ourselves in. What this standard does is enable you to show the checks and balances you've got in place to mitigate the controls at a baseline level. And it covers process, policy, and procedures. So it's not a technical control objective. It's talking about what processes you've got in place, and you've got heads on chickens, and who's responsible for addressing each of the risks that are actually out there. As I said, it enables organisations to identify appropriate and proportionate controls. If some of the controls don't apply to you, then you say, we'll accept the risk and it's not applicable. That's why they want to engage with SMEs more and more, so that everybody can say, right, we're certified to the standard. And what we see more and more, and we're seeing it in countries all over the world, not just in Europe, but in like South America, in Africa, in the Far East, where people want to make sure that people are certified to a particular standard. There is only one global de facto standard around the world, and it's ISO 27001. So people are saying, if you want to trust everybody, you need to get certified to the standard. In fact, a lot of organisations now are NOSI certified. You don't even get on the tender list. That's going to get increasingly, because the support behind this is incredible. And I've taken many SMEs to certification, and they turned to me afterwards and said, Vernon, I don't know how we survived without doing this. It's good checks and balances. I always equate it to being at home. You have window locks, door locks, alarm bells, guard dogs, because you're protecting your assets at home. You go to work and it's like manana, it's like somebody else's problem. Well, it isn't. These are baseline controls. They're not rocket science. Using the language that Maggie talked about, it's just good measures to provide a level of protection. So, what does it mean in terms of how to adopt them? So, you'll still, if you're already certified, can still use your existing policies and procedures. You'll need to tailor them in terms of the revised revisions and focus that's been put in place. The calibration, though, reporting is going to be very, very important. And stakeholders will soon get to know what those are and be demanding questions. So there'll be going to be more dialogue with senior management. We need to accommodate the new controls. The risk assessment and the internal audit checklists will need to be revised accordingly. especially risk assessment with threat intelligence, and obviously statement of applicability will need to be in with the new control set, not the existing one. And there'll be then a need to educate everybody in terms of what the revisions are and how that's going to be deployed on a day-to-day basis. So that's going to be important, not only for management, but for users, so that when the external auditors come in, you can walk the walk and talk the talk. So the benefits definitely provides you with competitive edge because it's going to be demanded, protecting and enhancing your reputation. And that's so important because the most important thing for senior management is brand. And if you can protect the brand and provide the service with minimum disruptions, that's what you want to do. Obviously, reducing financial penalties associated with data breaches in terms of GDPR, and ensuring compliance with legal, contractual, and regulatory impacts. So, overall, these are all the benefits. Easy for you to see and read, but compliance is going to be everything. Improved communication awareness. It's so important for people to know what's going on. Because we know, we talk about ransomware, we talk about phishing, vishing, ishing, anything ending in ishing, and we don't know what the new ishings are going to be because they're going to come round and there's going to be new ones coming out today, tomorrow. So you've got to make sure that you give guidance to people in terms of what to do. I'm a big advocate to not having an acceptable use policy on email and internet, but a personal information security policy that everything that's going to be coming in the future, you have one document that staff need to adhere to. People need the guidance. People want to do the right thing, especially working from home now. They want to know what they should do because they can tell the children and tell the grandparents as well. Because, you know, it doesn't mean if you get grey that you don't use it because everything you've got to do these days is online. And I was talking to my neighbour, she's 94, and they said, if you want to do that, you've got to go online. She's 94. You've got to go online and register. She hasn't got a computer, let alone go get online. Obviously, enhance staff skills with what's being required, what we need to do, so important. The bottom line, it's going to increase productivity, which increases operational effectiveness, efficiency, reduce your legal costs, reduce your risks. And the most important one is increase trust in your organisation or your business. That's what you want to do. You want to say you're trustworthy and can prove it. You know, I can turn to you and say, I'm a trustworthy person. You know, I'm trusted. You know, you go into a bar and you talk to somebody and you say, you know, you can trust me. And how would you prove that? How would you prove it? And trust is so important. Thanks for listening. I hope you found it interesting. I tried to make it amusing as far as I could. It's not the most exciting subject, but for me, it's what I do. And I've done it for 30 years. So if anybody wants to get in touch with me, you've got my email address there, and I'm prepared to take any question from anybody. Thank you very much indeed.
Hi, I was just wanting to ask if the new 27002 has got any better alignment to current technology and current ways of thinking, in particular zero trust principles.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. It does address those areas, but it's not a technological control standard, sorry. So it makes reference to those areas, and many countries around the world have been very keen to do that. But they do align with other standards and other areas, and there'll be a matrix alongside all those. That's currently being put together currently. Okay. I hope it's not going to be two at once.
Hi there. You can see IASME is doing the same sort of thing at the moment.
Yes.
They're revising their IASME goals
As
and all
my
that sort of
governance,
stuff.
yes.
And it's quite interesting. I also IASME, pardon my ignorance here, as being more aligned with the SMEs and this being for the
Yes.
bigger boys.
Yes.
that no longer true?
Not really. I mean, IASME take a lot of credence out of what ISO is doing anyway. And for some people who want to get a halfway house, they'll go to IASME Gold, IASME Governance as a route up to ISO 27001. The main aim of the current version is to take away that mystique, that kind of big albatross approach that it previously had. And they're trying to make it simpler for and more digestible for SMEs. So they'll both coexist because, you know, for smaller organizations, do Cyber Essentials Plus, they might do the governance aspect as well to give a level of comfort that they take security seriously. What the ISO group are now doing is to make it more digestible for them to actually go that one step further when they're ready to gain certification. Because some of the bigger organizations are now demanding not only a minimum of Cyber Essentials Plus, but now ISO 27001. So what we'll see and what we're hearing from the countries involved is that the baseline is going to be 27001. That doesn't take away what ISM are doing, because I think that's really good anyway.
We are due our recertification at the start
Yes.
of the 3-year period in January next year. So
Yeah.
how would you see that would fit with us? Would we be expected? Or
No,
I guess
you'll
it's
have 2 years to transition.
it's probably too early for us.
When you want to go, will be a discussion between you and your external certifiers. If you want to align yourself to the revised set, as I said, it's going to be published in early October. We haven't got a date yet, but they'll need to then train up the external auditors for them to audit you on the new set of controls. So I can't see that happening until early 2024, 23.
Thank you.
Must have been a good lunch.
Once again, thank you very much, Vernon. Yeah, this is something that's all going to be haunting us in the future. So appreciate your wisdom, insight, and, well, inside knowledge, I guess.
Thank you very much indeed.
So
Thanks, everybody.
yeah. Once again, thank you to Sapphire for supporting today's event. They are still upstairs, I believe. They're still handing out freebies and obviously available for you to have any discussions with about what it is they actually do and how they can help. I'm going to take a break before the last session, and so we can try and be back here in about 15 minutes or so. That'd be great. Thank you.